Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Simone once again for a nice little brief video about the growth of farming and agriculture and how this impacted politics in the late 1800s. So let's get started here. In 1862, during the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Homestead Act, and this was a way to encourage people to move out west. The government wanted to encourage and incentivize people to help settle the frontier. So they offered 160 acres of land for free to anyone who agreed to stay on it for 5 years and farm and cultivate the land. And I'll talk more about this in detail in class. But now, as all of these farmers went out to the frontier in the late 1800s, they faced enormous problems. So, first of all, weather related issues such as drought impacted their farm output tremendously. If insects got into any of their crops, that would destroy an entire season. The new machinery that they were using was very expensive. When they had to ship their crops, the railroads charged them very high rates, knowing that there was nowhere else they could turn. When they tried to borrow money from the banks charged them very high interest rates. Because there was such an abundance of farmers, overproduction of goods led to the cost of their goods going down. Ultimately, or in conclusion here, farmers faced an enormous amount of debt during this time. So politically, what did farmers do? First, they organized these local groups called the Grange. And the Granger movement was just a way for farmers to maybe try to share some of the responsibilities, teach each other new farming techniques. And the Grange became more of a national organization. But then they realized that in order to really achieve significant progress during a time where the government was primarily following a laissez-faire policy, maybe they should form their own political party. If the Democrats aren't going to listen to them and the Republicans aren't going to listen to them, we need to have our own party. Now, sometimes they call themselves the People's Party, but it's also going to be referred to as the Populist Party. And it wasn't just farmers, it was farmers and workers. Remember, we talked about labor unions yesterday. So what will this populist party be calling for? This is what we're going to spend our class time talking about. They wanted a graduated income tax. Remember, I mentioned to you there was no income tax at this time. They wanted the senators from every state to be elected directly by the people. Before this, the senators were chosen indirectly by other legislators. They wanted the government to own all the big corporations like the railroads and the telegraph and the telephone companies. They wanted tariff rates to go down. They wanted the presidency to be one term only. At this time, the president could be in office as many times as he wanted. They wanted a secret ballot. Before this, a lot of times your owner, your employer would know who you voted for, so they were hoping to have some secrecy in that respect. They wanted to restrict immigration. Immigrants were taking jobs for lower wages. Workers were not happy with that. They wanted an 8-hour workday. They wanted to be able to introduce more legislation. So referendum and initiative were ways that the people could vote on certain laws. Recall is the practice of actually removing an elected official before his or her term is up. That's another call for the Populist Party. And then they wanted to back up money with not only gold, but with silver as well. So they called for the unlimited coinage of silver. Now, I went through this quickly. Again, in the video, I'm just trying to give you a little bit of an overview, but I'm going to go into a lot more detail on this Populist Party platform in class. I'll leave you on this note. William Jennings Bryan is going to be one of the Populist Party leaders, but it's a little bit more complicated than that because he was first a Democratic candidate for president, and he was actually only 36 years old when he ran for office. Hopefully you realize he did not win the presidency, but I'll explain why in class. But one of his famous speeches is referred to as the Cross of Gold speech. And in this speech, he basically says, "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold," meaning don't just back up money with gold, let's back it up with gold and silver. Back then, you weren't allowed to print money unless you had the gold to back it up. So he figures if we can back up money with gold and silver, we can print more money. That will help us to pay off of our debts. But long term, of course, that would lead to inflation. I'm going to explain this all in class, so don't worry about it. But I will tell you that everything I kind of just taught here is going to be reflected, this is like my tease for tomorrow, in The Wizard of Oz. So we're going to mention that as well tomorrow. Quick overview, shouldn't have taken more than 5 minutes, and have a great day, and I will see you in class tomorrow.